Hello everyone, this is Loco S, and in today's video we're going to be going over mission editing and loadout notes for the UH-1 Huey. This series of videos, I'll add them in both in the mission editing and in the actual aircraft tutorial playlist. This is basically sort of a catch-all video to go over tips for adding Hueys into your missions, as well as designing missions that suit the Huey very well, plus some on and end notes that may not fit nice and neatly into other things, and additionally, this will go over some of the additional properties for the aircraft and the payload notes and things along those lines. So, first note is with the Huey is that it does actually require careful consideration for planning, because it can get pretty bogged down with weather and payload. So for weather, you'd want to be careful you don't set the temperature too high. I do know that the Huey recently was made fairly weather resistant, but I wouldn't really push the temperature up above, say, 25 or even like 35 degrees Celsius. I would try to keep the temperatures relatively reasonable, so you're not pushing like 80 degrees Fahrenheit or along those lines, mainly because the Huey still has the potential to overheat its engine if the outside air is too hot, and you can actually cook the engine and cause it to overheat, even though you think you're pulling a moderate amount of stress on the engine. If it's hot out, you're putting even more stress on the engine's ability to cool, and you'll actually burn up the engine and you'll fall out of the sky. So that is something to keep in mind. Like I said, it is better though. It is more resistant to heat, to outside temperature, although a future patch may dial that back. So keep in mind when creating missions for the Huey, don't make the exterior temperatures excessive, or else the Huey won't be able to fly properly. Or at the very least, you'll have to consider lowering the Huey's weight to compensate for the fact that you're not going to be able to push the engine as hard. Speaking of weight, the Huey does not like being fully loaded and fueled. So we go over here on the panel. We have the max weight here and its current total weight here, and you see that as a percentage. You can, for instance, give it internal fuel up to max, and then say go for a new payload here. We'll rename this payload full loadout, just because we can, and we'll go ahead and toss on basically all the guns and rockets that this thing can carry. And you can see we're quickly and very much easily at 112% max weight, and the Huey hates being overweight, and at this point it actually cannot take off in this configuration. It is just too heavy to actually fly properly. So what we would need to do is reduce, if we wanted to have all these weapons on the Huey, we'd have to reduce the internal fuel by quite a bit. And as you can see, we have to reduce the internal fuel to like almost like 20% in order for it to be able to take off under its own weight. With the new performance metrics, it still might be able to take off with, say, 50%, but I wouldn't really push it. Again, if they decide in the future to play more with the Huey's engine power, this loadout might work fine today, but in a couple of months' time, it might be completely broke. So try to keep the Huey's weight to at least under 100%, and ideally, as we increase its fuel, you want to try to keep it to closer to around 95%. And as you can see, by removing the pilot-controlled guns, but keeping the door guns, we can still have 30% internal fuel and full heavy rocket, the large rocket pods, and the door miniguns. Keep in mind, the Huey does actually have quite a lot of fuel, so even with 30%, you still have enough time to do a relatively quick mission of about like 30 minutes. So that is good news on that part, where the Huey's internal fuel does have quite a lot of fuel and doesn't burn through it super fast. So you can have the internal fuel set fairly low and have a decent amount of flight time for your helicopter. That said, this is still kind of heavy for a Huey. My recommended loadouts are M60s for your door gunners. As you can see, the M60s weigh a whole lot less than these miniguns. So, getting onto weapons, you have your pilot-mounted miniguns, both left. This is the right left mount and the right mount. Obviously, you'll want to mount both. It'd be kind of silly to mount one on either side. So that's the pylons 1 and 6. 2 and 3 are your rocket pod mounting stations, and you have the option of the 19 rocket pods here. Keep in mind that the pods that carry 19 rockets are quite heavy, so you might want to swap them out for a loadout like this, where you have only 7 rockets. And just to give you an idea of the difference in weight, we're going to set our internal fuel to 70% here. And you can see with M60 door guns and these pods of 7 rockets, we're currently at just under 90% of our max weight. Adding these larger rocket pods, however, actually, we'll keep this loadout the same. We'll go down here where we've added the 19 rocket inch pods, and you can see it jumps up from just under 90 to 95%. So if you don't need your aircraft to carry your a full 19 rounds of rockets, don't bother. Just go for your 7 rounds of rockets here. Keep in mind also that your fire control for the rockets in the Huey, you can set a maximum of 7 rockets in a salvo as pairs. So you can just set it to 7 and you'll get one burst of 7 rockets and you'll get all your rockets off in one go. Whereas if you're 19 pods, you'll have to continually press the button at least 3 times in order to empty out the pod. So keep in mind that while having these big 19 count rocket pods are cool, you are very much going to suffer in the sense that you are carrying a whole lot of extra ordnance around that you may not need. Should also mention with the rockets, the large rocket pods have high explosive rounds and smoke marking rounds. The smaller pods have high explosive white phosphorus, which is the same round as the smoke rockets here in the 19 count pod. You also have parachute illumination rounds, so you shoot these off into the air above a target, and they pop out with a parachute and deploy basically a giant flare that illuminates the area below them. You also have practice smoke and practice rockets for doing training runs. And you also have high explosive anti-tank, and this is going to be your rocket pod round that's going to be more effective against light armor. However, keep in mind you're still going to be kind of questionable effectiveness against light and moderate armor because you only have 7 rockets in 2 pods for a total of 17. So you're going to have to get relatively close and accurate solution in order to actually get a couple of scores with your heat rockets to take out moderately armored units. However, with your high explosive rounds, especially your high explosive 19 count pods, you'll be able to easily deal with unarmored and unarmored units, maybe a couple of very lightly armored units, and infantry. Moving on to the 3 and 4 stations. 3 and 4 are your door gunners, left and right. And this is you have 2 options. You have a M60, which is just a M60 bolted on the side. It's your standard M60 light machine gun. Very ground forces use this quite a bit. It's very common. You might even see some people of owning these themselves and shooting them. So it's just your basic M60 in a basically sort of in a vehicle mount configuration. And you have a door gun, which mirrors the same door gun that is used for the pilot and co-pilot here on the T stations. So instead of mounting them here, you can mount them there. You can also mount both. However, as you can see, this is a very heavy setup. So you can even theoretically do a full minigun loadout and just dump the pods, and you're still very heavy. So if you want to go full minigun, full gunship, you can. Just note that you won't be able to carry any rockets, and you will be very heavy. So you might not even want to do that. You might want to have a loadout of like 60% fuel, just to make certain you can get off the ground and be relatively mobile. So definitely, when it comes to designing loadouts for your Huey for missions as well as on online servers, keep in mind that it is very easy to go a little bit overboard on your weapons for your Huey, and a little bit overboard on your fuel amount, and you're going to run a very probable case of being too heavy to take off, or if you do take off, you'll be pushing the engine really hard, and you'll increase the chances of overstressing it and falling out of the sky because your engine blew up. Plus, you'll also tend to be a little bit sluggish, and that doesn't help in your flying capabilities. Now, if you want to increase the ability of the Huey to carry more weapons, again, lowering the temperature is going to be one of your options there. Also, limiting your fuel, that's an option. Placing the Huey closer to the actual combat area as an FARP is also a good option, so that way it needs less fuel to begin with to achieve its mission. So you definitely have options to get your heavier loadouts. Just keep in mind you're going to be limited in distance traveled. Also to note, when it comes to loadouts in the Huey, while you do have an option to do a civil plane, you can effectively just get that same effect by removing external hardpoints. However, I'll bring the view over here to make note of these are your countermeasure dispenser pods right here at the very tail end of the Huey. If you remove external hardpoints, removes the countermeasure pods on the Huey, so you're not going to have any flares, but you will be in a slick configuration. And that does actually also make the Huey slightly lighter. And in fact, if we go to empty right here and toggle external hardpoints on and off, you can see we actually gain weight by toggling on the external hardpoints. So if you want to basically be in a slick cargo or troop transport variant, go ahead and just remove external hardpoints anyways. And that way it'll free up some more room for cargo, and you'll be able to have an internal fuel load and still only be at 78% internal weight. And then you'll be able to add on troops, and then you'll be able to still have plenty of headroom of weight to actually transport troops and cargo into and out of combat zones. Of course, if you want to carry some heavy cargo, you're going to want to drop the fuel again to like 75% and continually just get this number as low as possible to carry heavier and heavier cargoes. Now, going over to some special options here. So I should mention that in the radio presets, make sure you set your radio presets to anything that might be important for your pilot during his mission. The Huey cannot change or set up presets in the helicopter itself, so you, the mission maker, are going to be responsible for setting them up here. Going over to additional properties, you can set up the aircraft control priority if between the pilot, the co-pilot. You can always have them ask always or equally responsible. I would just set it to pilot just keep it there for sake of sanity, unless you're doing multiplayer missions and you have a specific reason to change it to co-pilot or any of the other options. You can also do a solo flight. That does no effect really in game for the Huey at the moment. You can also set up how much engine life the Huey has currently. 90% is the default. You could, if you really wanted to, bring it up to 100. Give the engine a little more power and durability. You can also set the gunner's AI skill. I would leave it at 90% just for the sake of sanity. You don't want your mission to fail because your pilot flew everything correctly, but the gunners couldn't hit their targets and they wasted all their ammunition. So I would go ahead and keep this gunner's AI skill up to 90%, or if you really wanted to, just only drop it slightly to like say 80%. And something that's more or less cosmetic, but it's still fun to have is the exhaust IR suppressors. You can turn them on or off. Um, I generally keep them on. I don't know if this really has too much of an effect on uh, manpads or IR missiles. I might have to make a mission or two and test that out fully, but I don't believe, as of right now, or in my experience, that this has had much of an effect. So definitely, if you're flying a civilian Huey, you can just turn off the IR suppressors and fly this as a civilian aircraft like this. But if you're definitely flying a military helicopter, or if you're flying military operations, just put the IR suppressor on. It looks cool, and you'll give your helicopters a little bit more survivability when it comes to defending against IR threats, especially if they're in a configuration like this where they're clean and they don't have access to their countermeasures pod. Now, keep some other notes for actually planning your missions in the Huey. Keep in mind that for when you're setting up threats against your Huey, keep in mind that the Huey can fly below trees or between hills and tall buildings to dodge and avoid threats, but it's not able to defeat AAA or SAM any other way. You can defend against IR missiles with flares, but again, if you're in a clean configuration like this, you'll lose access to your flare. You'll lose access to your flares for countermeasures. So try not to go overkill when throwing up the Huey against opposition in game, unless it's out of the path and and the Huey was never supposed to be there in the first place. Keep that in mind. You can create missions where the Huey can sneak up like on a radar guided site, but I would make sure that the radar guided site can't engage the Huey unless the Huey does something stupid like fly over a hill in the distance. You can definitely have certain SAM sites not be able. You can definitely set the AI for SAM sites to not engage if the Huey is relatively close, so you can have that as part of your mission. Keep in mind, like long distance SAMs, like SA, even like an SA6 or an SA2, the Huey isn't really going to have much of a choice other than to like duck below trees. Speaking of engaging targets, the Huey can only effectively engage infantry and unarmored units. With your miniguns and your M60s being basically 30 cal machine guns and miniguns, you're not going to be able to destroy or damage anything that has even a modest amount of armor, because these aren't even 50 cals. Like the P-51 Mustang, for instance, has like 650 cals, and they're more effective against ground units than your miniguns will be with the 30 cal rounds. Now, obviously, infantry and like unarmored units like trucks that have no armor, your 30 cal rounds are going to work wonders against them, and because of their high rate of fire, you'll easily be able to hit and basically sort of paint over the area with a wall and tsunami of 30 cal rounds, so you will be able to easily wipe out those targets because of your sheer volume of fire. Again, your high explosive rockets are going to be a good option for things that are grouped and clustered tightly together. You do have the option to carry heat rockets, but again, those are going to be more hit or miss. You're not going to be able to reliably take out things that are heavily armored unless you get in really close and are really accurate with your rocket salvos. Also keep in mind, if you are doing night operations in the Huey, your co-pilot and door gunners won't be able to engage targets at night. For whatever reason, they don't seem to be able to use night vision goggles, even though you as the player are able to, so keep that in mind that on during night missions, unless you have a multiplayer setup where you are flying with door gunners, you're not going to be able to use them at night. interesting. Also keep in mind that a lot of your interesting missions at the Huey will be transporting cargo and infantry around. Again, if you're doing the cargo missions in your Huey, go for slick configuration by removing external hardpoints. That way you get the extra weight. You save the weight and you can do a lot of cargo missions that way. And that's pretty much it for the Huey and the mission editor, as well as my tips and tricks for getting the most out of it. You can definitely have a lot of fun setting up transport missions with slick Hueys. You can definitely have a lot of interesting missions doing combat search and rescue where you only have, or you set up, where you equip it with external hardpoints, so you get the flare pods, and maybe just give it, like, you can literally just have a situation where you have just door gunners and maybe a couple of light rockets, and you can go out there and search for a downed crew member while you have a couple of M60s to at least fend off any approaching infantry. You can do heavy assault missions where you are the Huey gunship and you're flying in and basically sort of suppressing an area and or trying to soften up a target so that other Hueys and their split configurations can land and deploy infantry. You can set up all kind of really interesting missions with your Huey. You can even do basically airport capture with the Huey, where you can fly in troops in your Huey, land, drop off your troops, and then fly away, and then have your other aircraft come in and land and be able to use the airport's facilities to rearm and refuel. So there's plenty of fun options here with the Huey. I'll leave you to go ahead and explore those in the mission editor, as well as creating your loadouts here. Keep in mind that any loadout you create in the mission editor will become available for you to select in the game. So have fun. Go ahead. There's not a lot of options here to pick from, but you can definitely create some other options beside the default DCS ones. And you can go ahead and create them and use them to your advantage to quickly get your loadout set up in multiplayer servers. So, this is Loco S signing out from the mission editor here with the Huey. I do believe the next aircraft I want to cover for setting up in the mission editor is the F-14 Tomcat, and that's going to be quite a bit more involved. So, until next time, this is Loco S, signing out.